Welcome back, everybody, to His Heartbeat. Again, we have a great show. I hope that everybody's having a great week. I have no idea where you all are right now, but I'm sure some are driving and some are eating and just hanging out. So, thank you for spending your time to hang out with us. And I would like to introduce Anna Murby. Did I say your last name right?
Yes, it's Anna Murby.
Oh, there we go. Because one N, is that why? So,
Yeah, it
Anna.
it slips people up. Some call me Anna, some call me Anna. I don't
Okay,
get
I
as
love it.
upset as I used to.
Oh, well, we don't want to upset you.
No, I'm fine. I'm good either way.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you, Anna, for joining us. And please just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm a mom of five.
Oh,
My
wow.
oldest is 17. My youngest will be 2 in November.
Whew.
Yeah.
Busy, busy mom.
Yeah. I just turned 40 in May. I make my own bread. I have my own podcast, and I've written 2 novels. I've been through a lot. I was a prodigal for maybe about 5, almost 10 years, I think. And I made some stupid mistakes because I was trying to control my own life. And through that, I have grown into the person that I am now. I have learned some things and I'm willing to share with whoever's willing to listen. I don't hold anything back. Any questions someone has, I answer freely and honestly because honesty was something I didn't have in my past. And
Mm.
that's something that I don't want to pride myself on, but that is what I try to do now is be honest, which is one of the reasons why my podcast is called Honest Christian Conversations, because that's what I'm trying to do is have an honest Christian conversation with somebody, whether they believe in Christianity or not. I just want to be an honest Christian. So that's
That's great.
me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just thinking Colossians 3 even talks about that, exhorts us to be honest, right,
Hmm.
with one another. So, that is a high value in God's kingdom for sure. So tell us then about, your upbringing and how you came to this, well, one prodigal, but then swinging back to that value of honesty.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the church. I've been going to church since I was in a car seat, like a baby car seat. So I knew all the things. I was the good one. My late grandfather used to call me. I did all the right things. I didn't make any waves. I didn't ever question why we did what we did. I just legalistically did what we were supposed to do. You do this, you don't do this. I never asked my family why. I never asked a pastor, why do we do these things? I always felt worried that if I got left behind, it was because I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. I always wondered, did I have a relationship with Jesus? Even though I
Mm,
asked him into my life when I was 12. But shortly after that, my parents got divorced and my life just kind of got turned upside down. I went through a hard time living with my mom and my stepdad. Him and I butt heads a lot for various reasons. And eventually, when I was in my 20s, I moved out. I couldn't take it anymore. I kicked myself out basically. So I lived on my own. And I wish I could say that's when I started taking ownership of my own life. But I kinda just jumped into a relationship with someone who was a very toxic person.
mm,
I ended up marrying him. We were married for 3 years. We had a child, my oldest, and he was narcissistic, physically abusive to her, emotionally abusive to me to the point that when I got to my last year of being married to him, I was mentally done. I was a shell of myself. I didn't had apathy for everything. I tried so
mm,
many times to leave him. I'm not proud of it, but I did try to commit adultery because he said that was the only way he would let me go.
mm.
And I felt that was the only way I could save my daughter and I, and it didn't work because he wanted to try to work the relationship out. So that really broke me because I was not that kind of a person. I wanted to get married once. I wanted to stay married. I wanted to have a good, godly husband and a wonderful family. And I just kind of shot that in the foot trying to commit adultery. That's how I felt. So I was very broken and depressed, and I couldn't even help my daughter. But she, he was very abusive to her. And when she was 3, This- she was 3. She wet the bed. He got really mad, sat her down on the toilet, and started yelling at her. I just laid in bed because at that point, whenever I tried to get involved to help her or whatever, he would tell me to leave him alone. So I would just didn't do anything. She's crying, she's looking at me, and I'm feeling broken inside because I want to help her,
Mm.
but I didn't know how. But that moment, something clicked, and I said, "That's it. I'm done." And I got a restraining order, got away from him. We ended up moving to Connecticut because I met somebody else, which is also something you shouldn't do when you're a broken person and you just got in a divorce. Never just jump back into a relationship. But at that point, I had chose to do my own thing. So I gave up on God. I finally felt like I was in control of my own life. No one was telling me what to do or how to do it. So I did whatever I wanted to do. And I made terrible mistakes with a lot of different people, some old friends. I broke some friendships over it. I just made a mess of my life back in California, which is where I was born and raised. So then when I met my second husband, I moved over to Connecticut to be with him. But we were only married for 2 years before he didn't want to be married anymore.
Mm.
That is that is the turning point for me. And I love telling this story not because of my mistakes, but because of how beautiful God worked through my mistakes. I can see, even in the midst of what I was doing wrong, I could see where God was trying to get my attention, trying to get me to go back to Him. But I was being stubborn and I didn't want to listen. So when I had my son, and I think that was during our second year of marriage, I had our son, and I was miserable, frustrated. We were both heavy into pornography addiction, and it was not a healthy marriage at all. We were both Christians running away from our faith. So we were doing the wrong things. I was doing everything I could to egg my parents on. I loved seeing when they would get irate with the fact that I wasn't following Christ or I was doing this or posting that. I fed off of that.
Mm.
So I just did it more because I wanted to spite my goody two shoes family who made me not able to question anything. Like I was just bitter and angry. I had so much inside me from years of not doing anything. So I just wanted to fight everybody. I went to a movie with my kids, and during the previews, there was a preview for a church called Revelation Church.
Mm.
And I saw that. I was like, huh, an hour of free babysitting, I could use that. It's hard being, because at that point, my second husband was working third shift. So I basically felt like I was raising 2 kids by myself. And I was lonely because I didn't have anyone out here in Connecticut. My whole family was back in California. He wasn't really there for me emotionally. So I felt really alone. I was like, okay, fine. I'll go. I'll get an hour of free babysitting. I'll just get a mental break. That's it. So I go there the first time, and there's a woman who's greeting, and she's very bubbly, very excited, all this stuff. I looked and I was like, please don't let her start talking to me because I was not in a mood. I was there for one reason, and that was to get away from my kids for an hour. And I didn't want to talk to anybody. But of course, she talked to me and she wouldn't leave me alone. And I was so frustrated. I went in, I heard the sermon, and as I'm listening to the sermon, it feels like God is specifically talking to me. Like we're
Mm.
just having a one-on-one conversation. I look at him, not really, but I look at him and I say, God, I hear everything you're saying, but I'm still going to do what I want to do.
Mm.
And I left that church service determined that I was going to do whatever I wanted to do.
Mm.
I signed up for a mom group. I don't remember why I signed up, but maybe it was just so I could find somebody. I went to one group. There were a couple women who started reaching out, and I think it was about a week later. That's when my husband said, "We're done. I already got an apartment. No, you can't move back to California unless you leave our son behind." Like, he just shattered my world, basically. I did
Mm.
not see it coming. I see it now that I'm older and I'm out
Mm.
of it. I see where we were getting to that point, but I did not see it at that time. And I was broken. And it was totally God how I came back, because the person who helped me come back was his mother, and she
Huh.
did not like me at all from day one.
Mm.
So she was a Christian. And she said, because I called her during a depression spiral where every time I looked at I don't even think he was a year old, my son, I would start crying because he looked so much like his dad. It hurt to look at him. I couldn't look at him. It made me sad. So I called her and said, I think you need to take my son for a while. I can't handle being around him. It hurts too much.
Mm.
And she said, you need to calm down, Anna. He needs you. Your daughter needs you. You need to let go of whatever's going on, and you need to get back right with God.
Mm.
She said, don't worry about the situation. Worry about getting yourself right with God. And we got off that phone call. I got on my knees and I asked God to help me through what I was going through. I said, I don't want a divorce. I want to try to save this marriage. Please forgive me. And I got up and I was completely changed. I could
Mm.
feel the difference. I felt free. I felt healed. And I felt for the first time in my whole life of calling myself a Christian that if I died today, I know exactly where I would be, and that would be in heaven. Because I always had that fear. Am I really going to go to heaven? Am I really a Christian? What if I get left behind? I don't
Mm.
feel that way anymore. And when I got
Mm.
up off that floor, I haven't felt that way since. And I haven't stopped following God since. And I did try to save the marriage, but unfortunately, it takes two people to try to do that, and he didn't want to. So in the end, it dissolved. But God was through the whole thing the whole time. And that woman that I didn't want to talk to me became one of my best friends and like a mom
Oh.
to me. We still talk, even though she lives in Atlanta now. But she became very helpful. And one of the other women that I met through that mom group I went to once, she also was very instrumental in helping me get back on my feet. We're also still close. I still go to the same church that I went to that first time. It's just God took care of me, which is what he promised he would do when I told my dad that I was staying in Connecticut, because he wanted me to move back to California. Because again, my family wanted to take care of me. They wanted to pick up all my pieces all the time. I said, I'm sorry, Dad, I can't do that. God told me he's going to take care of me now, and I'm going to
Mm.
trust him. And I didn't look back, and he has not let me down since. And yeah,
That's very cool.
that's
Well, we'll continue in a minute about the next three children, but there's more to the story I can tell.
yeah.
But I want to backtrack because you talk a lot about the word control, that
Hmm.
you felt controlled as a kid. But then you married, interestingly, a very controlling, narcissistic
Yes.
person, and then you moved into the next marriage and you were still fighting to keep that control even when others
Hmm.
were trying to draw you back to the Lord. So tell us more about why you had these strong aversion or feelings of being controlled. Like, I mean, I know we don't want to put our parents down, but and I don't think we're doing that. It can be uh, that we can. Some churches are teaching in very legalistic ways. So can you explain to us a little bit about what you think the line is, where we cross the line, as leaders in God's kingdom, right? Like he calls a
Hmm.
lot of us women to disciple others, and we're discipling our kids, right? So
Yeah.
when are we crossing the line? When is it legalistic, you think?
For me, I always felt that if I didn't do what my parents were saying was the right thing, that I was at fault, that I did something wrong, and God's gonna be mad at me for it. I didn't believe that there was grace for me for a lot of different things, which is why I tried to be a people pleaser and make sure that I didn't do anything wrong.
Was
I
that
was
self-imposed, or do you feel like it's the way you were disciplined, or the way you were taught the Bible, or what?
It probably was more self-imposed, if I'm being honest, because my mom says she didn't ever have any problems with me. And I don't remember too much of my dad being involved because he was working a lot. He was there and he probably remembers a lot more than I do from interacting with me in my childhood. I was with my grandparents a lot and they were not strict, but they were very Christian, very, they knew what they believed and why they believed it. But I don't know if their faith and why they believed it translated onto me. Like, it's really hard to explain. I just feel like either I was just afraid to ask them questions because I didn't know if they were gonna be mad that I was asking questions, because I know my dad used to get upset when I didn't know math, and I think that's probably one reason why I didn't ask him a lot of questions is because he would get frustrated because he was really good at math, and if I had a math question and didn't understand it, he got frustrated, so I just kinda stopped asking questions about math. So that could have been one reason because I never had a good relationship with my dad enough to talk to him about anything, let alone spiritual things. Because I love my parents to death. They've made mistakes. I've made mistakes, but I don't think they showed me a very good example of what Christ was like, what he truly is like, where if you make a mistake, he's not there ready to spank you with a paddle or something and say, "How dare you go to your room?" I don't know if my parents would have treated me that way if I made more mistakes as a child, but I always felt that way.
Did you have
And
siblings?
yeah, I have a younger
And
brother.
did you
He's
see him get smacked sometimes, or
he was
disciplined?
mostly the one in trouble. He was more of the troublemaker. I learned from because my grandparents used to watch me, my brother, and our two at the time, but sooner it became three cousins. So they used to watch five of us while our parents all worked. So they were all the ones who really got in trouble. I just kind of observed and was like, okay, this is what you don't do, and then you stay out of trouble. So I just kind of adapted to whatever situation I was in. I grew up in the church, so I knew all the things that you should be doing in order to have a good relationship with Jesus. And if you make a mistake, you got to figure out how to fix that. So it was probably mostly I brought it on myself because I was like, okay, I don't want to get in trouble. So this is what I should be doing, whether I really want to or not. My parents never specifically said, if you don't want a spanking like your brother, don't do this. It was kind of like an implied, I heard my brother crying from his room, and I was like, oh no, they're coming for me next. I don't ever want to go through this again. Let's do the right things now. And I think eventually I just got tired of doing the right things and not knowing why I was doing the right things, other than I just didn't want to get in trouble with anybody. I wanted God to love me. I wanted my family to love me. As I got into high school, I wanted a boyfriend. Like, I just wanted to feel loved. I didn't feel that love from my dad until I was probably about in my 30s. That's when we
Mm.
really had a good relationship. And it was not all his fault. Like I said, he made mistakes. And then after my mom and my stepdad got married, my stepdad was a bit controlling, and there was some other issues that went on that, for the sake of respecting him, because we have a good relationship now, I don't want to bring it up. But it definitely fed also into the reason why I was feeling like I needed to be in control.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when you share, it's a typical middle child syndrome,
mhm.
and so but you're the oldest, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I had throughout the years, I did have some, older siblings that were like siblings, and then I have a couple adopted brothers I haven't seen in ages that are
Okay.
younger than me, but I just yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird. I just a really shy child. I kept to myself. I played by myself most of the time. My mom, my brother, and I were really close before our parents got divorced, and then my brother stayed with my dad, and I went to stay with my mom. And then my relationship with my brother just kind of broke apart.
Mm,
He's not following the faith at all right now, so our relationship has been extremely strained more than it already was when we were teenagers.
mm,
And yeah, I mean, it could also stem because, like I said, my grandparents watched me and my three cousins. And in that scenario, I would have been third oldest, I guess. One of my cousins, his birthday is like 2 days before mine. So, I mean,
mm.
technically, we're like,
Yeah,
second, very close second. So, I mean, that could have something to do with it because we were all constantly together and our family was very tight knit.
yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
we all have behaviors that come out of the lies we believe. And
Hmm.
so, you went into that as a child, you were interpreting, how do I get love and acceptance? Because we all need that.
Hmm.
And whether it was imposed or not, your conclusion was, right, that I need to toe the line and be a good girl, and then I'll
Hmm.
be loved and accepted. But
Yeah.
probably that didn't meet your needs, right? Because
No.
just because we obey, yeah, our parents are passively, if I can say, passively happy with us. In other words, we'll continue to get fed dinner and we'll
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
don't get in trouble, but we're not necessarily getting expressions of love. And
Hmm.
so I could see where that can even lead to an idea that God's love is very passive.
Yeah.
That, yeah, that he, I all that he wants me just to obey, do all those commandments, and that sort of relationship with God is.
Yeah.
And you get to this place in life where that's not very fulfilling, right? Because we
Yeah.
have these deep longings to be accepted and to be forgiven, to know that we can make a mistake because we do, right? We
Yeah.
just do.
Yeah.
And we're human. And when we to know that, wow, that even when I really mess up, this person still accepts and loves me is so beautiful. Now, some people aren't into the chosen that show because they think it extrapolates or whatever. But I personally like it. And one of the things I most love about it is exactly that Jesus shocks the Pharisees, but even the disciples many times at his grace, at his forgiveness, at his acceptance of people who mess up and are weak, right? And sometimes he will like rebuke even a disciple, but in such a loving way,
Hmm.
And so I think I can see where, even at no fault of anybody in a way, just your wanting to be loved, which we all do, and that was the conclusion you made, and it was never picked up on,
Hmm.
uh, that is a legalistic kind of faith, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you did make you did walk away from the Lord. And when you came back, was that, you said it was life changing, was that moment, was that a moment where you felt God was just really loving you and accepting you despite the mistakes you've made?
Yeah. That's when I knew that he's been there the whole time,
Mm,
and he didn't love me the way that I thought he did, which is only when I do good things,
mm,
because I was not doing good things. I was making terrible choices that I knew were wrong and still made them anyways. And he did not smite me down, which is what I thought would happen immediately, that I would get punished right away for anything bad that I ever did. But as I looked back on the things that I was doing, or even in the moment, knowing what I was doing was wrong and saying, I should be in jail right now for some of the stuff that I've done. I should not be blessed with the children that I have right now.
mm,
I should not be allowed to see any of my children. I've done some terrible, awful things. And God still protected me from those consequences for my choices. I
mm,
still have a few things that I have to go through, kind of like a thorn in the flesh, like
mhm.
Paul was
Sure.
saying. That's exactly what I've got. I've got something chronic that comes up like 3, 4 times a year, and it's uncomfortable, it's painful, but it's a part of one of the mistakes I made.
Mhm,
And instead of looking at it as a bitter, angry moment of, you shouldn't have done that, I look at it with grace lens and say, God was good. This is all I really have to deal with. This, and, I have 2 ex-husbands. So sometimes I get the looks, I get the, wow, you're on your third marriage kind of thing. Like,
mm,
I get all those different things. I can handle that because it's God's grace and kindness to me that he gave me a wonderful husband and 3 more children. I mean, I just realized so much what he has saved me from, where I could be. I could still probably be in jail right now. Like I said, I wouldn't have my children for some of the things that I did that were wrong. But he saved me from those consequences. And if all I have to deal with is some severe nerve pain that gets me down 3, 4 times a year, I will gladly accept that because I know I deserve so much more.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
completely rewired my brain to realize there's more to a relationship with God than what I thought. It's not just me doing the right things and then him giving me a pat on the head and saying, "Good job, little girl." No,
mm,
it's okay, you made a mistake. Why don't we figure out how to fix that? Yes, there might be some cuts and bruises, there might be consequences, but you'll be okay. One of my favorite books of the Bible, it didn't used to be, but it is James. I
mm,
love how every time I read it, I feel convicted. And it reminds me that God loves me, because if he didn't love me, he wouldn't be convicting me when I do things wrong. Just like a parent loves you, and if you're doing something wrong, they might need to discipline you. It's the same thing. It's the same feeling I get as a loving parent who loves me and he's helping me to be a better version of myself. So I don't fear reading James now. If I read it and I feel convicted, I thank him for it, and then I try to figure out what I'm doing wrong and how to fix it. So I think I have a healthier version of who God is. And there are times where I kind of slip back, maybe I'm too tired to read my Bible for the day. And that nagging feeling in the back of my head is like, maybe just read one verse and then he won't be upset.
mm,
What if your podcast suffers because you didn't? Or what if something happens to your children? It's like those thoughts will still come in, and
mm,
I hate them so much because I know that's not what God is about. He's not there waiting to strike me down just because I'm tired one day, or I forgot I didn't read my Bible at this specific time of day, or my prayers didn't sound just the right way. So I still fight it off, but I've gotten more to a place where I'm working on making my relationship with God my relationship with God, not riding on the coattails of my parents or anything. It's, why do I believe what I believe? And
mm,
I'm also trying to help my kids do that too, because I don't want them to have the same experience with God that I had. I
yeah,
can say, unfortunately, that my oldest probably got a bulk of the way I used to be because I didn't have my transformation yet. And she stepped away from the faith right now, but I'm praying for her. But I am working on it with my other four. So,
That's good. Yeah, there's a lot in that. There was a season that the Lord just I think I was often taught this image of like the letter Y, where you're walking with God and then you come to this crossroad and you go this way or you go that way. And so there was a season, I think I can share this, where my daughter, she went this way, opposite the faith. And but then and I'm kind of agonizing over it. And after about a year or so, one day as I was praying for her, the Lord just said, "There's no why." There's just a squiggly continuous line. She is not stepped out of a journey with me. She's on the journey with me. And that was shocking to me. It's like, oh, so you can totally like reject Christ, but he never leaves you. I did know that, I knew that he's still holding on, but that he's journeying through the muck or the turning away
hmm
period, just as he journeyed with, in the prodigal son. It wasn't like, oh, he went off there and to the right and God went to the left, or God was still going straight and he went all the way over here. God went with him into
Yeah.
that pig farm. And that's how the Spirit could speak to him in the midst of that. And God was protecting him to where he didn't starve to death, right? He
Yeah.
did still have food. And as in your story, God did protect your kids, even though there's consequences. So that was huge for me. And it when you realize that, you don't become so despairing or like, "No, you've gotta turn back now because," but you can have God's peace because the Lord is still with that person, and he's not excited when you go down that path, and he knows that the consequences will be a bummer, and it's not his best for you, it's not what he wants
Mhm.
for you, but he's in it with you, and he's gonna draw you back, but it takes time, and there's things that need to be healed or broken to bring you back to that place.
Yeah, exactly. I have the peace that passes all understanding in regards to what's going on with my daughter right now because she doesn't live with me. She lives in California with her grandmother, her paternal grandmother. So, I mean, I don't have access to her the way that I would like to, which is a good thing because control is something I still fight with God
Mm.
on. And she was someone I had to relinquish control to God on. And it was not an easy task to do. But I did tell him if I let go and trust you the way that I trusted you before to take care of me when I was out here alone, I said, you have to take care of her. And I said, "I'm gonna
Amen.
believe that you're gonna do that." And I haven't looked back. There's moments where I'll cry, she'll send me something and I don't like what she
Course.
said and I'll cry, but I will worship God through that moment and then I'll just keep going because I know He's got this. He's doing whatever He's doing, and I don't know how long it's gonna take. If she's anything like me, it's not gonna be a quick one. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we really need to express love to our kids even in that stage, and
hmm
we need to be open to listen to them, not just always turning the conversation back to Christ, but
Yeah.
to like how's your job going, and yeah, how's it go with your boyfriend? Maybe you can't stand the guy and you think he's the worst thing under the world,
Yeah.
but what's it like where you live? Oh, send me pictures of your place. That kind of
Yeah.
thing, I think, means a lot because what we tend to do is this feeling of like, um, either just they're afraid to call us because we're always going to preach at them,
hmm
and they don't want to hear it. One thing I used to say to my daughter is she'd share a problem and, of course, right away you're thinking of the biblical answer or what, what
Yeah,
Christ would say to that. And a lot of times I just listen and ask more questions and help her get into her heart. Like,
yeah,
well, what are you feeling through that? What are your thoughts? And one thing, well, what's true about this situation? What's not? That they do that in the
yeah,
secular world, right? So, fine. But then sometimes I'd say, um, do you want a mom moment? Which she knew meant like a spiritual moment. You want a mom spiritual moment, and then some days she'd go, "Nope, not today, mom." I'm like, "Okay." And then once in a while she'd go, "Yeah, okay, lay it on me, mom." And then
yeah,
I'd start sharing, and sometimes she goes, "Okay, that's enough." And I'm like, "Okay." It's just a beautiful thing. It's like,
yeah,
I gave her permission to help me have a boundary that she could handle, and if she didn't want to go there, that's fine, and then
yeah,
they don't feel controlled, and they also feel like they still have a mom that loves them, that cares about them, not just about how they're doing Jesus, but cares about
yeah,
the new dress they bought, or the struggle they're having at work, or whatever. So that's
yeah,
just my advice to moms out there, because I think a lot of us go through that. And like you said, you know, you're even saying, like, I don't know even know if it was my parents were really controlling or was legalistic church, but this is just how I perceived things, and I needed to get away. I felt controlled, like I wanted.
mhm,
And I think what you're really were in a search for is finding you, your true
yeah,
self, because you were just being a chameleon, whatever other
yeah,
people wanted to be. You weren't being you, the real
yeah,
color, okay?
yep,
And so, then you're like on this discovery to find that, and it's hard. It's hard for parents, definitely is.
yeah,
But I think when they letting people really find their true self, like you said, then you came to your belief, and it wasn't because of your parents, and your faith has unique things. Like all
mhm,
of us have a unique relationship with God.
yep, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. Um, yeah, I'm trying. There was another thing ah, I started writing some. Oh, the consequences. Yeah. So another thing that you're saying, like, you don't regret that you still have some of those consequences, and I can really understand that, because I think when we are experiencing some of those consequences, God doesn't take them all away, because it reminds us, not not so, hey, look what you did, don't do it again, but
Yeah,
more like God's grace,
mhm,
God's love, that he
exactly.
even was with us through that time, but also reminds us what sin does, right?
Mhm,
Because I mean, we're remembering kind of the worst of our sin, but when we remember that, I think two things happen. One, then we don't even want to do the little thing that really starts that off, right? We don't even
yeah,
want to go there. But also, I think it enables us to be a lot more grace filled toward others
mhm,
who are struggling, maybe with a similar thing.
yeah, yeah,
So,
I
do you feel
completely
that's your
agree.
message, is a lot about grace?
Yeah, it's something that it's been a struggle for me to give it in the same way that I've got it myself, and, that makes me angry at myself that I I don't forget what I've been saved from, I know, and I know the depth of it. It's probably my past, the way I felt, the way I observed from the people that I was around Christian wise, because I've never really had non-Christian friends. I think there was like one little period where I was hanging out with kids, maybe sixth to eighth grade, where at school I would hang out with people who weren't Christian, a couple people in my neighborhood, but I didn't really have non-Christian friends. all my friends were Christian. We knew the right things to do. We did all the right things. If
Mm,
people weren't doing it, we were judgmental. So
mm,
that's something that I've been working on, is not being judgmental and not holding people who don't know the Bible to a standard that I expect them to know because I know the Bible,
mm.
which is something that's very humbling for me because I grew up, I know the Bible, I know the things that we shouldn't do, I know the Ten Commandments, so it's like I'll hear someone say a bad word, and I'm like, why would you do that? But if they're not a Christian, they don't know. So why am I going to hold them to that standard? So I'm working through making sure that I give people grace like God gave me grace. I'm more intentional on that, and I will feel the conviction immediately if I'm not like that. And nothing's more humbling than your children trying to raise them and
Mm,
realizing that you're not giving them the grace that they should. An example of it was kind of recent. I was talking to my son's father about something our son was doing, and he was trying to talk to me. And because I still have some, not, I don't know if they're bitter feelings or just feelings that I need to continue to process to fully forgive him for our past, I couldn't fully at the moment hear what he was saying, the parental advice he was trying to give me, because it was frustrating me. I'm like, how dare you try to give me parental
mm,
advice? You haven't been trying to be a good parent before he was 9 years old, kind of a thing. Like, it was just, my
uh-huh.
pride was not
Right.
allowing whatever God was trying to tell him to tell me. I just didn't want to hear it at the moment. So I mulled it over. I, was driving, doing some stuff, thinking about it. And I realized that what he was saying was correct. I need to be more aware of how a teenage boy is going to, have moments. My son is emotional like me. How would I have wanted to be treated in that moment? So working on giving him grace. So I took away one of the punishments that I had given him,
Mm.
and I gave him a hug when he got out of school. I waited until his friends weren't around because I know how they are.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I gave him a hug and I said, I want you to know what God's grace is. And I said, this is it. I said, I'm taking away the punishment that I gave you. And I want you to continue to do the good things that I was expecting of you before. I said, but you don't have this punishment anymore. I said, I still want you to do your best. I said, that's all we ever want is your best. We will love you no matter what happens, but I want you to do your best. I said, but I want you to see what God's grace does. And I'm taking this punishment from you. You have it was Fortnite. I was like, you have your Fortnite game back. You can play. I said, but I still want to see you maturing. I still want to see you growing and everything. I said, I just want you to remember that God's giving you this grace and that mom loves you.
Mm.
So,
So
I
how
mean,
did he respond?
he was happy. He's like the whole punishment. I was like, yeah, because I gave him an unrealistic expectation and I didn't really notice it until his dad was talking and I let go of my stubbornness. And then I thought about it. And then when I was telling my husband about why I got rid of the punishment, that's when it fully hit me. The depth of what I was expecting of him was something along the lines of what I was expecting. I wanted him to be mature and I didn't want him to get the game back until he was mature. But as I was telling my husband this, because he's like, why'd you give it back? And I said, he needed to know grace. I said, it's not fair to him. Maturity. What is that? His version, my version, your
Yeah,
version,
yeah,
his
yeah.
dad's version. I was like, he's not going to know. He's never going to feel like he's arrived because he doesn't know whose he's doing. I said, so I wanted to give him grace and told him I still expect him to mature as he grows. I said, and we'll work on punishment as needed. I said, but I felt it was really unfair to give that to him in such a time frame of which he doesn't understand what that means. So he
Yeah.
understood and I got it. And that just kind of reminded me of that's what God does. He doesn't just say, I need you to be good, like how I felt I needed to be good my whole
Uh-huh.
life. But I didn't know whose standard of good I was trying to be, which is why I was, as you said, a chameleon. Was
Mhm.
just weaving in and out, didn't want to get in anyone's way, didn't want to make any paths that might, stir something up. So I'd be whatever this person needed, I'd be whatever that person needed. I
Yep.
just didn't want anyone to make waves. I don't want to cause any trouble. So,
Yeah.
and I don't want my son to be that way. And I've noticed that he can. So I'm very hyper aware of I don't want my kids to feel like I did.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's smart. I think as parents, we can be praying, asking the Lord to show us ways that we can teach our kids about grace. I think we can even teach them scriptures about grace, not just, oh, the Bible says to do this,
mhm,
but the examples of where Jesus really was patient with people and, um, and he did extend a lot of grace. So, yeah, as well as us doing that. Well, this has
mhm.
been great. Thank you so much, Anna. I just really appreciate you coming on. So, share with us again the name of your podcast and also the books that you've written.
My podcast is called Honest Christian Conversations, and my books are The Right Way to Say Goodbye and Then My Life Happened.
Okay.
They're
And
both Christian fiction novels. The
okay.
first one is about a young man who's trying to save his marriage, and then the other one deals more with, um, kind of finding who you are in Christ.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. All right. Well, this was a great testimony. And I think, especially for us moms, gives us a lot to think about.
Mhm.
Are we displaying grace to our kids? And are we um, teaching them about God's grace and His love? So, thanks so much. And everybody, have a great week. Share this with others. And we'll see you back here again next week.